go. There we go. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the WonderMama Coffee Chat. Every week I sit down with, hold on, I have to read this because, me. Every Wednesday, I sit down with incredible people who are intentionally bringing good into the world, into motherhood, into entrepreneurship, and into the lives of the people around them. So, and we talk about real stuff. We talk about the things that we really need to be talking about in this time. So, today, after about 30 minutes here with all of you, we're going to drop into a private conversation inside the WonderMama place for our community members. If you're already a member, be sure to join the Zoom link. If you're not yet, the door is open to WonderMamas. Now, today's guest, you can see her. Jaki Shelton Green is the first African American Poet Laureate of North Carolina, a retired Duke University professor, the author of 9 poetry collections, and the recording artist behind the album The River Speaks of Thirst. Tonight, she's performing with Durham Symphony in the Letters to America. And this Saturday, she'll receive an honorary doctorate of humane letters. She is also the founder of SistaWRITE, creating writing retreats and spaces for women across the United States, North Africa, and Europe. She calls herself a 73-year-old crone, and she's still building. Oh, and she is also my stepmother. Jaki, welcome to the WonderMama Coffee Chat. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's such a wonderment to sit with you in your womanhood and in your sisterhood and in all the really magnificent, magical light that you're weaving into the world. So thank you for inviting me into your circle.
I'm surprised I haven't had you here sooner. I really needed to have you sooner, and it's what I think what gets to me is every time we start talking about women and the people that we wish to serve in the many ways that we do, there's so much synergy in the work that we do for women. You have spent a lifetime creating space for women to tell their stories. But I want to know, for you, when did you really feel like it was time for your story to be told?
Thank you for that question. You know, having raised 3 children through 2 really traumatic divorces, uh, as a single mom, really, just struggling with the everydayness of survival, of being, just financially secure and making sure that everyone had what they needed. There was only time to do the work of making sure we were thriving. And once my children, I'd successfully helped them reach that plateau of adulthood, and even before then, let me say before then, because I started thinking about who I was in my early 20s and realizing that I had really sort of disenfranchised my own identity, and my identity was more connected to my husband, my PhD professor husband, and then my second husband, who was a chemist, Eva's father. And I was Imani Segun and Eva's mom and their wife. And when I published my first book, I'll never forget that my first husband, who I was divorced from at the time, I divorced him in 1974, sent me a dozen of roses. And the card said, "You should be happy that I provided you such trauma in order for you to write this magnificent collection of work."
Thank you
And
so
I said,
much.
"Touche." But I tell that story because I knew better. My mother, the women around me, my aunties, the women in my community modeled what owning yourself looked like. But I was too busy being, I think, shadowing myself in my concept of what I was supposed to be.
Mm.
Um, I dropped out of school to have children, so my first husband could run this trope with me that, oh, nobody will want you. You're a single mom with two kids. You're not educated. And he ran that trope to the point that I bought into it. But I did a lot of work on myself and I sat myself down and I started thinking about um, how I have used everything but myself to define myself. I also thought about uh, my own capacity for change and
Mm.
transformation and what that looked like. And what that looked like was really just standing up in my own dominion and declaring that I am here. Not only am I here, but I am beloved and gracious and deserve all the joy and all the wonderful uh, things that working hard can bring to one. So it was due diligence. It was doing my own due diligence and really not expecting people to hand me anything, knowing that I was relying on myself.
I I I resonate with that a lot. Um, that story is many women really struggle with what's expected and those titles that we hold.
Mhm,
Um, and it takes something, maybe hearing conversations like this to even know that there is due diligence to be done. A lot of times people get stuck in, women especially get stuck in the roles that we play. I
mhm,
am their mom. And I just talked to this beautiful entrepreneur, um, Alanis Wolf, who shared, she said, she was in a networking event and they said, there are there are two kinds of people in this world. There are mothers and there are their children. And I'm like, you know, we have the capacity to do so much as women,
mhm,
the capacity to do so much so that we sometimes don't realize we are at capacity. And you talk about the women in your life that were in your young life when who were living fully,
mhm.
um, and able to be your role model. It's incredible. It's just incredible because not everybody has that. And so I'm so grateful to have you here to talk about that and to model that. You call yourself a crone, but you say it like it's a crown. Um, can you tell me what that word means to you? Because I'm headed into the elder stage of my life as well.
Well, it's interesting because all my life I have been drawn to older women and I have enjoyed sitting at their feet. My mom died, as you know, at the age of 106, 3 years ago. And I just was blessed to witness how she merged into elderhood. And uh, I love holding court, and I love women who have the capacity to hold court and to claim that, we're tired, but we're not done. We're exhausted, but not in the exhaustion of being depleted, that we have so much more to offer. And right now in my life as a creative maker, as an entrepreneur, um, I really experience um, ageism very powerfully,
Mm.
very powerfully. So I really have embraced my cronehood. I've spent a lifetime waiting for this moment.
Mm.
There are women my age who's like, "Why don't you dye your hair?" And I'm like, "No, I have no intentions of dyeing my hair. I am very, very comfortable and happy in this truth that is me. And this truth that is me is what you get. And unapologetically, with much grace, as much grace as I can offer to people, and being open and understanding and not being gatekeepers, because crones aren't that self-right. We shouldn't be self-righteous, but we definitely should feel good about stepping into the space in our lives where we can look back and we can really see um, all of the joy that we deserve. We can really see how that capacity for change has delivered us to this place. We can really see how not having resistance to slowing down
Mhm.
allows us to be in this healthy place. And a few minutes ago, you were talking about those kind of boxes that we've put ourselves in. And I think that the toxicity of this culture, does not, it's only been in recent years that women are not ashamed to talk about divorces, are not ashamed to talk about maybe pregnancies before they were ready for pregnancy, are not ashamed to talk about rejection, are not ashamed to talk about self-hate. And the more we can arrive at these places, and not in celebration of trauma porn, because I'm sort of over us bonding over
Mhm.
trauma, you know, bonding in trauma, but we must now bond in wholeness. And I'm not sure if that's the exact answer to your question, but right now it's all of me. It's showing up in all of my allness and
Mhm.
everydayness, and letting people know that this is what you get every day, that it's not performative,
Mhm.
that it's reality, and that we're creating and altering and manifesting the realities that we need right now as we age.
I thank you for that because I it's life goals for all of us, you know? It's truly life goals. And also thank you for showing up while you're struggling with cold.
Yeah.
Cold's got your
Hard.
family. That's okay. But it's also part of the wholeness, you know, and authentically being yourself. And earlier this week, I met a mom who is really struggling. She's got a 2.5-year-old baby. She's a single mom. And she showed up as first thing she said was, it is really hard. And there is a stigma of being a single mom, single Black woman working. And she couldn't get there. And I, a certain amount of anger comes up, but also the acceptance of it. Like the only way for us to get through this is not to lead into the trauma. We have to lean into, okay, this is the deal. What's next? And what can we do? And I think you in your crone crown really give an opportunity for us to see that there is more, see beyond the trauma. We've all got it. We've all got trauma, but everything in the Wonder Mama is okay, this is where we are. Where do we want to go? And how are we going to get there? And let's go together. But we're not going to sit and stew there because that's not what coaching is, right? And that is not that space. It's not in the space of mentors. It's not in the space of that. We're trying to grow. Um, so trauma bonds don't help.
Right.
Sometimes they give you a starting point, but only if you're really intentional about it. But women, mothers, I think that what you've shared here is that there's so much more beyond the roles that you've played. So, or that you are. I'm not even say play because it's not performative, but the roles that you hold in your life. Which of them do you think requires the most challenging bravery in you?
Oh my. Um, Perhaps being that role model, because much is expected. their anticipations, their expectations. And, you know, as you were talking about that young woman, I was thinking about how language is so important. And as a writer, of course, I'm very mindful and intentional about language. And, you know, it's taken me a lifetime to understand that, you know, instead of saying it is so difficult to be a single mom, but I am a single mom who's doing the best that I know. I'm a single mom who every day um, is celebrating progress that's invisible to everybody but me. And we don't know how to celebrate the progress that's invisible. Does that make sense? You know, we
Oh,
celebrate
100%. Mm.
the things that are named, the things that go public. Um, for me, I know that as an older woman in the many communities that I hold space, take up space in, that there are a lot of women of all ages looking at me, looking for me, coming to sit with me. And I take that very seriously because you can't go messing with folks' lives if you don't have your own mess together. You know, it's very important that we become whole and healthy.
Mhm.
And that's the biggest challenge for me is how I empower not other people but myself, you know, beyond the comparison of old wounds, beyond the comparison of what if, but rather to help people show up in their wholeness. And that's a foreign concept for a lot of women. I remember, I'll tell a story. Many years ago, I facilitated a workshop entitled Secrets.
Mm.
And it was not for people to show up in the workshop and actually to tell their business, to tell their secrets, but more to come and think about a secret that's holding you hostage. You know, we all have secrets, families have secrets, communities have secrets, and we do a very good job of individually and collectively building the containers for those secrets. But many of those secrets hold us hostage. And so there were many questions attached to the treatment of this workshop. And one of them is, you know, what are the containers that you build to keep this secret? Why were you told the secret? Why you? Why are you the holder of this secret? And how has the secret, you know, how is it dominating your life in ways that are holding you hostage? And this is with writers, so and it's blocking your creativity. Well, that same workshop could be for anybody that's just blocking you from showing up fully in your life. So many years later, I'm at a writers festival, and a woman walks up to me with a large gift bag. Before she presents the gift bag, she says to me, "You won't remember me. I don't expect you to, but many years ago, I attended a workshop that you facilitated at UNC called Secrets." And she said, "One of the things you said, you asked us what were the permissions that we needed to release the secret, to bury the secret, to hand back the secret, to dismantle the secret." And she said, the word permission, she said, I couldn't get it out of my head. She said, I never thought about the fact that I was not granting myself permissions. And she said, the secret I was holding was, she says, I wanted to be a novelist all my life. And she said, I started writing like 10, 15 years ago. And she said, my husband would laugh at me, would ridicule me, would say, who do you think you are? Nobody wants to hear anything you have to say. You can't be a writer. You're stupid. And she said, I kept writing. She said, my husband would find my manuscripts, my journals, and he would destroy them. So she said, we live in a very small rural town. She said, I went to the bank and I rented a bank box, a deposit box. She said, I go to the library. Excuse me. Sorry. So she said she'd go to the library and she would write, and then she would take her manuscript, you know, the text, the paper text, she would go put it in her bank box. She said, well, she did this for about 2 years. And she said, "It's a small town. Everybody's first name at the bank." She said, "My husband apparently went to the bank without my knowledge and said to the teller, 'Hey, my wife sent me to go in her bank box and get a piece of jewelry out. We're going to a fancy dinner tomorrow night, and she needs me to get this necklace out.'" Well, the teller thought nothing about it. She gave him the key, the number to the box. When she went back to her box, not only had he burned the manuscript, but he put the ashes in the box in place of the manuscript. So she said, "I'm sitting in your workshop, and that word permission was just like clobbering me." She said, "I drove back to Eastern North Carolina from Chapel Hill, 3.5 hour drive." She said, "In a torrential thunderstorm." She said, "I couldn't see a thing." She said, "Not only because of the rain," she said, "I could not stop crying." And she said, "The word permission was pounding on me like a headache." She said, "I walked into my house," and she said, "There he was, sprawled out on the couch, knocked out, 12 beer cans sitting on the coffee table. The football game was watching him." And she said, "I just stood there." And she said, "Something in me just opened up." She said, "I went to the bedroom." She said, "My husband is the type of man who throws all his cash money on top of the dresser, his credit cards, his wallet, his keys, everything." She said, "I took every credit card." She said, "There was $2,000 in cash." She said, "I took it." She said, "I grabbed a duffel bag." She said, "I threw in sweatpants just as much as I could." She said, "I got out of the house, got in my car." She said, "I drove to Athens, Georgia, where my daughter was in graduate school." She said, "At 4 o'clock in the morning, I rang my daughter's doorbell, and my daughter looked at me and said, 'Mom, what took you so long?' She said, 'Today, I want to gift you my 3 novels.'
Oh,
I would
wow.
not have written these novels if you had not said, 'What are the permissions you have not granted yourself
Hmm.
to do the thing that you have to do?'" And she said, "For me, it was writing." So I think about the power of language and how language is such an archaeological, anthropological dig for us. We're all human museums, and all of our stories are inside of those human museums. But a lot of things that are inside of our human museums are also the things that are blocking us. Um, so I've kind of forgotten the question, but
Well, no, no. I mean, but wait, basically what what you're saying is where, which of these required the most permission, and
yes,
what you're sharing is really that the authenticity and holding the honor of being authentically you, and how important that is in all of these situations. From that
yeah,
story, the secrets workshop, which super cool. We're gonna have to talk about that for sure. Some more. I would love that. But permission is an incredible word, you know, and I think it can be applied for, I mean,
yeah.
any of the moms that I work with every day. That's an incredible question.
Yeah, permission and accountability. And I remember it, there have been times in my life when I talked about a lot with myself about holding everybody else accountable, but really had to be very reflective and think about, how do I hold myself accountable?
Mm.
And how, because to truly hold yourself accountable, uh, is to be very naked, and it's to allow your vulnerabilities to speak to you. It's to allow all of your ugliness to speak to you.
Mm.
And, we have been trained and taught culturally, you know, inside of our families, inside of how families model relationship building. I mean, that's where we first learn relationship building is inside of our nuclear family. And, and not hating people, not blaming people, but just honestly saying, people people do the best they can do with what they have at the moment, and
Mhm.
people really think that they're doing the best they can do. So I know a lot of, friends who say, "I'm not sure I've done the best I could do." raising my daughter, she didn't turn out the way I thought she was going to turn out. And I said, but you have to stop holding yourself accountable for something you can't undo. You face that reality, you make peace with it, you make peace with that person as much as you can, and we move forth. Um, but yeah, I mean, that difficult thing, like I said, is how am I hold the difficult thing for me is making sure I'm holding space in honest ways, and that I'm holding space in safe ways. And SistaWRITE, which is a writing retreat for women, really turns into just a worldwide scope of women being women with each other and giving themselves to permission again to be women. I remember my first sister write a writer friend came who I'd been around a lot, who I always saw her as very quiet and very introverted. She would come to all of these writing workshops, but she never talked. She never engaged with people. She came to my very first Sister Write retreat 10 years ago. And 4 o'clock in the morning, after a lot of wine, the women are sitting on the porch, and they're singing show tunes from Motown to you name it, to bluegrass. Dogs are howling, neighbors are screaming, "Shut up, it's 4 o'clock in the morning." And this friend taps me on the shoulder. She's sitting slightly behind me, and I turn around, and tears are just streaming. And I'm like, "Oh my God." And I'm like, "Are you okay? What's going on? What's happening?" And she just whispered, she said, "Thank you." And I said, "For what?" She said, "I've never felt so wanted. I've never felt so included." She says, "I don't do women because I'm afraid of women."
Mm.
And she said, "This is the first time I've been in a group of women where everyone is just loving on each other and me, and I know that there is no ulterior reason. It's just who we are." And she said, "I've never allowed myself to be present to that." And from that night forward, this person opened up. I mean, tremendously opened up. And now she's the talker in all of our retreats, to the extent that another friend texted me one night and said, "You opened her up and now you can't shut her up." Uh, and it's been wonderful to see her just bloom inside of herself. She went with me to Morocco on a retreat, and I said, "Well, Mel, if you want to travel with some, I don't want to travel with anybody. I'm traveling alone." I was like, "Okay."
Yeah.
So she traveled alone to Morocco, which I thought was going to be really challenging for her. And then 2 months later, she called me and said, "FYI, I'm going to London tomorrow." I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "With your job?" And she said, "No, there's a museum there I've always wanted to go to. I'm just going for a few days. I just wanted to let you know." And I was like, "Okay." These are things that Mel would never have done.
Yeah.
So for me, it's just, it's staying in a space of honesty, it's staying in a place of generosity, it's staying in a spirit of gratitude. And I just feel like the more safe spaces I can offer for women, and the more I realize that I am just a conduit, I'm
Mhm.
just a facilitator. I don't bring any magic to the table.
Mhm.
I don't bring anything that they don't already have inside of them. What I hope I'm doing is providing them some skills and some deep uh, ways to excavate, and they're excavating through writing, but some tools to excavate inside of their own rich anthropology and that human museum that I talked about.
Yeah.
Because the deeper that we go into it, the more we find the reflections of ourselves, the more we find more of ourselves that we've buried, um, and the more we can awaken ourselves to. I have another friend who has a retreat called Dream Yourself Awake. And, you know, what does it mean to dream yourself awake?
Mm. I love this. So So you are a conduit, and while you you say there's no magic, there's magic in the space and the intentionality around the way you do it. And helping women find their voice in their writing. I am new to this world. The past 10 years I've been working through journaling and creating space and helping women find their voices in that way. And so it's inspiring to see how much further this kind of work can go,
Mhm.
and the work that it can do. This is the Mother's Day week, and Mother's Day is coming. And so, first, let me be the first to say Happy Mother's Day, because you are going to be a busy woman this weekend. But also, I'm gonna drop your website, and just kind of everyone should follow you to see what's going on with you. But how what would you leave a woman who hasn't learned to give herself permission, who's still living in the sort of chaos of overwhelm of being a high capacity mom without knowing that she's actually at capacity? What would you say for her?
Well, I think it's important that as much as we talk outward, you know, we live in a culture where physical fitness is very it's connected to capitalism. Uh, Physical fitness is lauded, and people spend millions of dollars on the physical fitness industry and their bodies. But inner fitness for me is equally, or maybe more important, because that shell can be as buff as you want it to be and as fashionably beautiful. But what about the values that you have not started protecting of your the value of yourself? Those sometimes we don't know the currency of our being, how valuable we are. And I think when we start thinking about currency, all of our lives are rich currency. And, you know, I think that those inner conversations have to start happening around inviting women to look at their habits, inviting women to look at versions of themselves that they don't like, but they can't seem to not repeat to keep that version alive. They're afraid to bury that version of themselves or to work on that version. Um, and asking themselves, what do they need? And how do they honor just calling out that need? A lot of times when we just speak our truths, when we just speak what I need, what I want, and I think women, especially because we're so busy being caregivers for our children and our family, our circles, and sometimes our faith spaces, and sometimes our employment spaces, that we just don't ask ourselves what we need and ask it and really ask for it. Um, and then what are the desires that you need to say, I'm done shaming this desire. I'm going to name it. I'm putting it out there and I'm going to work towards it. So, what are the truths that we're ready to name?
Mm.
Again, it's harvesting the internal work first.
Mm.
I think a lot of people get in trouble, and this is no bash at all on people who, are doing the coaching work, but I've met a lot of coaches who are really should not be coaches.
Mm.
We
Why?
have to do
We need to know why first before I
yeah,
let you go.
yeah. We have to do our own work. We
Mm.
have to do our own healing.
Mhm.
I remember, for years working with the local mental health association that wanted me to facilitate workshops with victims of incest. And I remember there were some coaches there that should not have been coaching, because they were still wounded. They were
Yeah.
still calling themselves victims, and until you can stop calling yourself a victim, until you can name yourself, you know what I mean, survivor or whatever, it is that you name yourself after, like let's think beyond the aftermath. Like, yes, I endured all of that. But I survived. I thrive. I'm bigger than all of that. I mean, just remembering that that's just one instance in our lives. Those bad things are things that hurt us to the core. And I'm really talking from a place of self introspection. Those things that hurt us to the core, if they're still hurting me to the core, I really should not be trying to, you know what I'm saying, coach someone else because I've not healed.
Sure. For sure.
And I know and there is an argument that, like, do we ever really heal? Well, I believe that we do heal, that there's a capacity for healing. Um, and the moment we decide that we want to stretch out into healing is the moment that the healing starts to happen, you
I
know?
love that. I love that comment because it kind of opens up the opportunity for me to kind of explain. A lot of times
Mhm.
coaches who are functioning in that space, that space that you're talking about belongs in therapy.
Right.
There is a big difference between a coach and a therapist.
That's right.
Somebody who is ready to be coached has been actively working on that wound, and maybe they're still bruised, but they're ready to move forward. But if you're
Mhm.
still stuck in that space, that's therapy.
Mhm.
If you're ready, you're at the acceptance part where you know that you're ready to move on. That's when a coach can come in and help you walk this path to the next thing. So a lot of times, so for me, that's a really big thing. That's a huge distinction. If you're stuck, you just can't move on.
Mhm.
Let's get you into therapy. You can start with a coach. Coach should know when we're in the wrong space. A
Right.
coach should know that. When you're ready to
Mhm.
walk the path, when you're ready to land where you are and meet yourself in a new way, you're ready to be in a coaching space. A coach will walk with you.
Right.
A coach will help keep you accountable on your path, will
Mhm.
keep and share their tools. I have tools. I've spent the last I don't know, 6 years really creating the Wonder Mama Compass, which is a 5-phase
Mhm.
journey.
Mhm.
But we don't start from inside the trauma. We start on the other side of the trauma. If we're still in it, we go back into therapy. If we're on the other side of it and we're
Mhm.
ready to move forward, that's when we can do really great work. So I love that you brought that up because it's really important. A lot of people are not sure what's the difference. You don't come to a coach completely broken. You come to a coach for direction.
Exactly. And I think that we get caught up on not being able to release some of the standards
Yeah.
that we have assumed because, I mean, our this culture has done and continues to do a number on our psyches around self-worth.
Mhm.
Um, and when I'm when I'm encountering, these teeny tiny little 3rd graders who are sitting crying, little girls, I'm like, what's wrong? I'm so ugly. Why are you what no, you're beautiful. Why do you think you're ugly? Because my mom says I'm fat. And I'm looking at this child who is like skinny as rail, and I have dark hair. My mom and my sisters have beautiful blonde hair. I'm just ugly. And to already see, you know, uh, the norms that are being projected onto her
Yeah.
about beauty,
Mhm.
we carry those standards into
Well, all the way into that beautiful mom that I talked to just last week. There's a
right,
stigma about, and she was wearing it like a cloak.
right. And we do
You know
wear
what?
it. Yeah. But
Wh-
everybody doesn't wear it, and, you know, and the other part of that is, before we get off of here, is building community and a sisterhood, like, you know, because when she's not working with a coach, who in her community can she turn to? Where's her tribe? Where are the people that are holding space for her? And
Mhm.
that's something else, is just helping women to intentionally try and build those communities. We can do that. We can find our people.
That's what the Wonder Mama place is all about. That's what Sister Rights is all about. Creating space where women can, and we in our society doesn't make it easy for us to lead into those spaces and feel safe. So we just keep leading in and talking to each other and believing that and staying intentional. I thank you so much. We are going to stop this live. We've gone over what I promised, but that's okay because this has been such a rich conversation. What I'd like to do is, first of all, for those of you on social media, thank you so much for being here with us today. Join us every Wednesday at noon live right here. Next week, I have Wendy Hushon. I hope I said that right. With me. And if you are part of the Wonder Mama place, you can come as we drop off the live and ask Jaki questions directly if there's something that you really would like to, or if you'd like to continue the conversation. We're going to go off into a private conversation. And Jaki, thank you so much for being here with us today. I hope I can have you back
Thank
because,
you for having
or
me.
maybe we'll do some cool Wonder Mama things. We've been talking about it for years. Um, but I really appreciate you being here. Good luck tonight with the letters to America.
Thank you.
And I wish I could be there as you were receiving your doctorate this weekend
Me
there
too.
in spirit.
And happy Mother's Day to you and
Thank you.
all of the Wonder Mamas.
Yes, amazing. Okay, goodbye, everybody. See you next week. Yeah.